All right, thanks, guys. Sorry for the delayed start.
Dad, do I still have to push the button?
If you get to know me, you'll know I'm always late. So, shed season. So, Angel, I brought those sheds for you to look at. So, some of you came last month to our altitude collective. We talked about elk calling. The reason we're doing these is to kind of just something to do in the winter, something to get together and get excited about. We call it a collective because I don't want it to just be us necessarily, like me just talking to you guys or whoever's presenting. So feel free to chime in whenever. But this month we want to talk about hunting high country mule deer, sort of some tactics and tips and all that. And we can talk gear. Whatever we want to talk about. If we have any questions we want to discuss to the group, there's a lot of guys in here that hunt high country deer. And so I don't think any one of us necessarily has all the answers. So I'm going to take the first little while, then I'll open it up to questions, whatever we want to talk about. Then you guys know Matt Tillotson sitting in the back. He's going to finish us out. And there's sort of three things we're going to talk about in regards to deer today. And I think number one's finding big deer. And I'm mostly going to focus on hunting mature bucks, but I think it applies to everything. So it'll be finding, patterning, and then Matt's going to talk about sort of finishing the job, what we call the red zone. So I think sometimes we go into hunting season, it's just like, hey, it's time to go deer hunting, right? We can go have fun, we can kill a huge buck, right? But sometimes I don't think we set appropriate goals for ourselves, and so we don't really know how we're measuring ourselves, and sometimes we can come out of a season disappointed because we never actually set ourselves up for success on what our goals are, right? So I think this is a huge thing to think about is the what. What are your goals for the hunt, right? Are you looking for a certain score, a certain age class? Are you looking to have a certain type of experience? Hunt in a certain way, right? Hunt a certain place, use a certain method, archery, tackle, whatever it is, right? I think it's important to define that. And get that really clear in your mind, right? Whether that's, oh, I want to shoot a 170-inch deer or a 220-inch deer, or I really want to kill a buck with my bow that's mature, right? So setting those goals and then understanding how to get there, I think is really important. The where, that's always a big one, right? Like trying to figure out where certain people hunt or where am I going to go this year? Or even if you scouted and have multiple options, like where am I going to go, right? That's an issue sometimes. And then I think when's a big deal too, especially with our longer seasons here in Wyoming, or what used to be longer seasons, right? We're shortened down to 9 days now. Are you going to go at the beginning? It's typically a little more crowded. Do you want to go at the end of the season, right? You're going to go in the middle. Season dates, all that's going to play into everything. Moon phases, I know that's a big one in elk hunting. I think it is in whitetail hunting. I never really pay attention to it with mule deer, but I know some guys do. Anyway, I think that's all important stuff to talk about. What do you guys think? When's your favorite time to hunt high country Wyoming mule deer? Would you like to go to the beginning of the season or the end of the season? For the whole season. This year I'm going to go the whole season.
Come with you.
You know, it is hard to prioritize time though, right? Like some guys can take the whole season off, others a few days, right?
Well, if you're going to do it that way, then go the middle of the week.
Yep.
When not so many people are out there, you can concentrate on it.
Fewer people, it's kind of hard to miss the opener, especially if you have a buck picked out that you want to try and kill.
You got a full archery season too.
Right.
So you got 2 weeks before that with whoever's archery.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a very important time.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of guys here you'll find use it as a glorified scouting season, right? Where it's like, oh, well, I'm not gonna push it because I can come back with my rifle.
It's so hard, I mean, come on, if you're sitting sitting on the buck that's 200 inch, 220 inch, okay? And you got a bow in your hand, what are your odds of getting that deer with a bow? 1%?
I think overall archery odds in Wyoming's like 7%.
Right, so would you sit there and you wait until they open it and then blast them with the rifle?
No, that's what most guys do, right? That goes back to, I guess, what your goals are. I think sometimes we use it as a crutch because it's like, oh, I can come back. I think the guys that typically get it done with a bow, their bow or nothing, right? So they kind of set that for themselves of like, hey, I'm gonna kill this bug with my bow or I'm not gonna kill him, and then your mindset changes a little bit.
It's, anyone who's ever killed any deer with a bow, my hat's off.
Right. Oh yeah, it's hard. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I
Sort
think
of
it runs
preparation.
into also, I mean, my mindset going into archery season is, you know, if it's a big deer, I'm gonna try to kill it, because if I wait 2 weeks and I have a sea of orange people going after potentially the same deer, right? So,
Right.
is it harder? Absolutely, but, you know,
You usually
throw
aim
your
to
chips in
yourself
and
though.
go.
Right.
Rather mess up and have him disappear than
Oh, yeah.
not take a chance and have somebody else shoot it.
Yep.
Right.
Kyle, have you ever not killed a buck with your bow and killed him later with a rifle? Like a target buck?
No, I don't think I have. But I mean, I've seen them. I've had a chance to kill them. So, I mean, the thing is, in archery season, even if you, like last year, for instance, I bumped the same deer probably 4 or 5 times before he kind of got a little bit on edge, you know? And then I ended up shooting a different deer in a different area, but, I don't know. I think your chances of repeated attempts are greater with less pressure from everybody else. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Like if you're in a basin by yourself, like, I mean, you can find the same deer. He might move 300-400 yards, but you just find him again and make a play, you know?
So, I 100% agree. Also, you gotta think about your behavior too. You know, as September 1st goes by, September 10th, they're starting to change their behaviors. And so it's, I mean, you're kind of playing with fire, really, because that buck's gonna probably go, he's gonna drop, possibly, he's gonna go into the timber, or he may go off by himself. We never see him ever again. So, I mean, I guess I agree with everybody, you know, kind of waiting, it's a good game, but you also, you gotta take your chance when you've got it too.
Well, and I think our dates are hard. Wyoming dates are hard for archery because a lot of times they're shedding velvet right then, and usually you'll see we'll talk about that a little bit later, but sort of a behavior change when they go hard horn, right? So when that's happening, usually around the first, like it's almost like you got to find that deer and pattern him again to figure out where he's moving to make it happen. Other states like Utah and Nevada have an early archery hunt.
Yeah, it's August 20th.
Yeah, well, 10th in Nevada.
10th in Nevada.
It's some units at least, but it's a little different game, right? Those bucks are still soft velvet, and their habits are still the same. So, but a lot of those are archery only tags too, so you have to make it happen during the archery season. So I think that just kind of goes back to, you got to decide what you want to do, right? Like, I think if you want to kill a buck with your bow, you got to go all in, or you're not going to get it done. And if you don't, then I guess you can rifle in later. But any other thoughts on that? Okay, let's talk about gear. This is something I touched on last time. I didn't bring a ton of gear. I know Matt brought some. Happy to field any questions on gear. With our shop, we get to play with a lot of different stuff, so we see a lot of different types of gear that are coming out, and I try to stay kind of on the front end of new products on the market, all that kind of stuff. Shameless plug, we have our new tripod out.
It's nice.
So these are I break gear into 3 sections, kind of. Shelter, that's anything that's gonna keep you safe from the elements, right? So clothing, I call shelter, camp, whatever, right? Your coat, your gloves, your boots. Food is a big one, you gotta stay fueled up so you have energy to hunt. And then hunt and harvest, that's gonna be gear that you carry because you're hunting, right? So, like you don't carry optics if you're not hunting, stuff like that. Kill kits, your rifle or your bow. And so my dad, I said this last month, but my dad would always, when we'd be leaving the house, he'd say, coat, hat, gloves, food, water, matches, gun license, bullets, right? That was our checklist. So I still do that today. But those are same three categories. Got to make sure you got what you need to be out there. Does anyone want to talk gear at all? I mean, gear for me is it depends on the time of year, what you're hunting a little bit, right? Optics is a big one we get asked about a lot. Spend as much money as you can. This is I think the ideal mule deer spotting scope, the 20 to 60 ATS. It's a good mix of what's kind of lightweight. It's got a 60x eyepiece, so I can zoom way in and see what the animal is. And then I glass off my tripod with my binoculars most of the time, probably pretty much all the time, until I see something I want to get a closer look at.
Why don't you talk about the lightweight, compact Swarovski binoculars that they're coming out with now?
The spotters or the binoculars? The NLs?
And spotters too, yeah.
Yeah, so, well, we're on the subject of spotting scopes. I don't have one here today, but the ATC Vortex just released a new compact, right? They're kind of these 56 millimeter compact spotting scopes. A lot of guys are kind of looking at. They're nice because they're super lightweight. Your trade-off on them is that you don't have the big zoom range. So for me, I prefer more zoom range, but that's what I like. I want to discern 10 inches on a mule deer, right? So I want to be like as close as I can. So I know a lot of guys will run this spotter with 25 to 55, the wide angle. Well, I want the 60x so you get way in there. But if you want to go ultra lightweight, and you're not so concerned with this much antler length, then those compact ones are really nice because you're half the weight of a lot of your other stuff. And then the NLs are unbelievable. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look through them. Soro has a new prism design. It increases the field of view. They're super lightweight, but there's a lot of great optics on the market. I would just say spend as much as you can. Good wide field of view is nice. Terrain, it really depends. Like I have a lot of guys asking about 15s, 12s, 10s. It totally depends where you are, right? Or like the BTX, some of those fixed spotting scopes, like depends on your terrain. Like if I'm scouting, I'd be more inclined to carry like a 15 by 56 because I'm going to stay further away. But my field of view is a little smaller, so as I get further away, that's okay. When I start to get into like, hey, there's a buck I want to kill and I want to be within striking distance, then I prefer like a 10 by 42. I use the 12 by 42 NLs because they're expensive, but they're a mix between a good field of view and a mid-sized power. I do think they're kind of the ultimate country binocular. think I've had a chance to use, so. So I guess we'll jump into what I consider kind of the first part. I mean, we can talk about preparation and like getting a tag and all that kind of stuff. That goes way back. We're fortunate here that we can come down to the shop and just buy our tag over the counter, so we don't really have to talk about that. But finding your buck, that's the first step, right? Whether you saw one last year that you didn't get, or it's a blank canvas and you're just looking for something, right? The more time you can spend in a unit, the better you learn it, right? The better you learn the behavior of deer, the better you learn the behavior of other hunters, and all, all of that stuff. Where the water is, where they like to hang out, slope aspects, right? Like, it's interesting, like I've hunted deer a lot on the Idaho side of Star Valley, and it's very different than this side, right? Because it can be 10 miles away, but just the elevation profile of the mountains makes the deer act different, right? This has a whole nother 2,000 feet on top of this stuff over here. So the deer don't have that to utilize over here, and they use it differently. They use the entire mountain differently on this side, I think. And so there's two main methods, I think, to kind of find a target buck, and that's mostly what I'm going to talk about, is mature mule deer hunting, right? Or, because they are a little bit different animal than sort of your 2 and 3 year old bucks. So when I say mature, I'm talking 5+ years old, maybe 4. Sometimes you can find a giant 3 year old, but. So I think that kind of the two methods that are out there is going to be preseason scouting, and then what we'll call in-season scouting. So when I hunt out of state, sometimes I don't preseason scout. I try to do in-season scouting. If you just show up and start hunting, but you treat it a little bit different, right, than if you have something found. And typically, your biggest variable on this is time, right? So what's nice about preseason is you can aggregate time over several months, whereas like in season, you kind of have to make it happen during the hunt. But so when we talk preseason scouting, where do you guys usually start? Last year's?
Go to the same spot,
Same spot as last year?
bucks are back.
Right.
I've never done very well digital scouting. Like, I know a lot of people do, and probably your out-of-state guys can do a lot of it from, like, if I was gonna go hunt Utah, I'd probably utilize that a little more.
Yeah.
Being locals, drug around through the mountains as a kid, you kinda know certain basins where you know deer should be, and would be a good spot to check, or you've watched deer from years past that could be up and comers.
Right. So I use digital scouting a ton in addition to everything else. So for me, I try to learn like 3 new places every year that I haven't been in, just because I just think the more country you can cover, and then you kind of got the old hunts that you want to go check out, right? Or a deer you saw last year that you're like, I need to go look at him, see if he made it through the winter. But I use digital scouting a ton, actually. And sometime, maybe one of our collectives, we can kind of deep dive into e-scouting. Because I like Google Earth the best, but I'll use OnX. There's all kinds of softwares out there, Scout to Hunt, Base Map. I like Google Earth because I can pull it up on my desktop, and I just feel like the 3D controls and the image quality's the best. But a lot of times what I'll look for are things that I know deer need. So, and I'll compare it to places where I've been and seen deer before, right? But I'm looking for bedding areas, feed, and water. And a lot of times, the imagery will tell you the story with trails, right? The Google imagery is good enough that you can see deer trails, and you'll tell they're a game trail because they'll come out of the bedding cover and then into the feed, and they disappear, and then you'll see them come and they'll reappear again going in the other side. because when the deer or elk, when they come out of their bedding area, and they'll disperse and feed, and then they'll pinch back together and cut through the other side. Whereas like a horse trail, it's just gonna be just solid all the way through, right? So that kind of stuff tells me quite a bit of like, okay, historically, some of these trails have gotta be centuries old, right? Are deer using this area? Are they feeding here? Are they bedding here, right? And so those are the places, a lot of times I can say, I think there'll be deer right here. And then you go look at it in the summer, and there will be. And we're fortunate because the Wyoming range, really, you can just close your eyes and throw a dart at a map, and you're probably gonna find some deer there, right?
Not anymore.
A third of the amount that you would have last year. Any questions on digital scouting? Trailheads is another one that I look for on the maps, like on Onyx. State land, different types of access that maybe other people aren't finding. So the second one, learning the country, that's one you can do any time of year, right? So like even jump on a snowmobile and go hit it in the winter, like it's a great way to get eyes on it and just kind of look at what it looks like. Or anytime, you want to go bear hunting in the spring, the deer won't be there yet, but you can go learn the country, learn the trails, kind of anticipate where you think the animals are going to be. Because that is, like James and I went elk hunting, it's a place we'd never been this year. It takes a few days to kind of get your bearings, right? Especially that first day, you learn so much. And if you're burning it up during your hunt, then you're burning up the best time of your hunt, usually the first day. But I try to learn new country every year, even here, even country I've been in, but it's been a long time. I just try to go check it out. If it looks good, then I'll go back. Usually, I don't start looking for deer until like the end of July here, because I don't think they're back yet completely until then. And the antler growth's not to the point where you can really tell what they're going to turn into. I mean, not that you can't go earlier, but usually I find if I go earlier, I'm going back again. Like if I go into an area like early July or June, and I see a buck that I think might turn into something, well, I'm going to go back later and look at him again. That's usually what I do. I think earlier, in my experience anyway, if I find bucks earlier than that, they're hard to turn back up again. And I think it's because they're moving through, not necessarily back to their home range yet. And during the migration, they'll follow that protein-rich new green feed as it comes up, and they'll kind of concentrate where they have growth and then move up kind of slowly. And sometimes it's middle, late June before you have decent growth of, above 10,000 feet. Talking to other hunters, biologists, I think that's important, especially if you're going into an area blind. Sometimes you can get some good tips. A lot of times guys will tell you about country or access or stuff like that, not necessarily about specific animals, but winter range scouting, that's another one that I think a lot of guys kind of overlook. And it can be hard to you find a buck on the winter range to know where it summers, but finding them on the winter range tells you that they're there, right? And as you do a little bit of research, sometimes you can kind of figure out like, okay, well, deer that winter here, there's quite a few of them that summer over here, right? So I think that gives you it's fun to get out in the winter and look at them, but it's also gives you some valuable information. The big thing's just connecting the dots, right? I think a lot of guys go out and do those things and they don't try to correlate it back together. It's more like, oh, I'm going to the winter range. But there's never any thought of, hey, how does this correlate into the summer range? It does. Trail cameras, anybody use trail cameras for mule deer? So I've used trail cameras intermittently over the years. Some of them don't work, some of them I've had work. I usually focus on Where I've had the best successes in areas where I know where the deer pinch through already, and I put a camera there. So I've never used any sort of attractant or anything. Water around here is difficult because there's a lot of water. You can find an area that has very little water. I think trail cameras on water can pay big dividends, but there's not very many places like that here. And then sign, understanding sign, that's a huge one. And you can utilize parts of the day where you can't necessarily glass to learn a lot about what animals are doing there, right? So it's important to learn and understand, like, what's a big buck track look like? You know, what is a fresh bed? How do I tell how old the sign is? Because you can, if you go into a new area, and maybe you glass and 10:30 everything's bedded up, well, you can go cover some country and just look at the ground and get a pretty good idea of, you know, where they're bedding, where they're traveling, high traffic areas. You can look at water and see if they've been watering there. So when I scout, I like to stay overnight if I can. I'll try to go. My schedule's always crazy, but if I can get in, sometimes I'll even just go in the dark, but is to go in, try to get an evening glassing session, and then I'll stay overnight, get up in the morning, glass, and then jump out of there. If it's a multi-day scouting, I'll just move to another area. I don't think you see everything. I know you don't see everything in 2 glassing sessions. You might not see everything in 10 glassing sessions, but you see some of it at least. And it lets you kind of cover a lot of country and try to pick up what you can. Anybody have anything to add to that?
Yeah. One thing that gets me with mule deer, and they drive me crazy, that's why I go hunt else, because there's always something going on. But I was going through it's a huge canyon, but up on the, kind of towards the top, well, it's kind of a false top, but there's a cliff right there, and then some thick timber, and then a big base, and then the peak. And I was hunting elk in there, and I stumbled onto this deer bed, and it's like warm, like it's been getting used, and it's got a great big old buck track in there. And I've hunted that country for years, and I have never seen a buck in there. You ever stumble on something like that, spend some time on it, and have you ever had success? I never saw that buck. I didn't spend any time looking for it. Once in a while I'd glass up there and see if he's bedded down there, like throughout the next couple of weeks, but never laid eyes on him.
I'm trying to think if I've found deer in weird places. Mule deer, big bucks they're hard to hunt because I think they can move into a little area and hang out there for 3 weeks, right? And what they're really good at is finding a spot where they're not feeling pressure, right? And I think a lot of times we think, like an elk, they'll just go down into a big dark hole and stay down there and bugle back at you. It seems like, right? They taunt you, but they'll just go into the nastiest downfalling timbery crap, and then you're like, all right, if we got to get him, we'll go dig him out, right? Well, but they'll move quite a ways. I don't think deer do as much. I think they'll find a little spot. Right. But I had a similar experience, and I never saw this deer either. But I was right off of a road, hiking into a further in area. I'd seen on Google. I was like, I'm gonna go look at this. So I'm hiking in there, and I'm like 100 yards from the road, and I jumped a deer. I didn't get eyes on it, but there was just big buck sign everywhere, right? It's like this little rocky, little craggy, like 300-yard basin, and I think he was just living in there. And it was fresh sign, and he was right off the road where nobody would ever look for him. And from what I've heard from the Game and Fish, their GPS collar data kind of tells that same story, where they have some bigger deer collared, and they'll just go hang out down in some timber for 3 weeks till the hunting season's over, and then they'll leave. And that's That's what's fun about deer. If you have the personality to wanna dig them up, right? Cause it can get super frustrating. You have to stay very, very persistent.
It helps every once in a while they let out a little yip or something, so you live in there.
Yeah.
Like y'all do, you know?
Right. Just a little bugle.
I want to see him December.
In-season scouting, so this is like, what I would say, so you don't necessarily, I think you do both, right? Like, in-season scouting, you should always be in-season scouting, just because of the nature of deer. Like, you might have a target buck, you might be hunting that target buck, and then out of nowhere, some giant buck steps out, right? Like, you gotta be open to that possibility always. So I think it's easy to get tunnel vision and be like, where's my deer? And it's like, oh, that's not him, that's not him, that's not him, right? He's gotta be right here. Well, here's his cousin right over here that's just as bigger, right? The other thing, like I've pre-season scouted before and then had not found anything, like some of those hard years, like 19, 20, after the last winter kill, maybe 2021 were harder. Where I didn't really find a buck that I wanted to hunt, right, during the preseason. So I was like, well, let's just go hunt, right? So that's what I would consider in-season scouting. This is a buck that I killed the last day of the hunt, just going into a random area. 2018, I think, just turned him up. There's a little bit of snow on the ground.
This was opening day of elk season.
Opening day of elk season.
Awesome.
Yeah.
In-season scouting.
Yeah. This was the day before elk season opened. I think this was out south on when it went to the 14th. No, this was when it was closing on the 10th out there, I think. But I'd never seen this buck before. He's cool. I mean, he's not a huge scorer because his frame's not very tall, but he has big 5-inch eye guards and mass.
Do you think he was on a migration when he was coming through?
I don't know. It's hard to say because it's not I mean, even if I did pre-scout the area, I don't know. It's hard to say.
That's what I see him on, mostly out, like, when they're hunting out south end, is I'll see bucks that I have hunted up in Grays River,
Right.
see him down south.
Oh, yeah. And the early migration kicks in, I think it's earlier than people think, right? Like there's some data that some guys are gathering that suggests that a number of deer have passed all the way through 135, from 145, 144, 143, all the way through 135 before that hunting season closed, right?
Yeah, they're heading to the top.
Right. But before the 14th of November, they're passing under the Nugget Canyon Highway down there. So weather can get them moving.
I was just gonna say, I killed a buck, there at Cottonwood and, saw a video. I actually was doing cabinets for James and I think his brother-in-law had seen my post or whatever, said another kid's got sheds and he was wintering clear in Sage Junction.
Oh, yeah.
So from Cottonwood clear out to Sage Junction and back and forth, so
Right.
long ways.
I've heard crazy stories about the migration here. Like I've heard of guys having sheds off of bucks that were killed in the Wyoming range in Grace, Idaho, right? Like the migration's so weird. Like somebody killed a collared deer down in Geneva that was collared in Labarge. So like, which you're like, oh, those are both winter ranges, but why would they flip flop? Like,
Right.
and it's that way for a reason, right? And we've seen that over the last few years with our winter mortality. The severity of the winter range, like, or snow levels on the winter range varies a lot, right? From South Sage Junction, Nugget Canyon, right? Even down on the Crawfords to Labarge, even up north into like North Piney. Like you can have very different snow levels through all that country. And certain areas will get hit with winter mortality way worse than others, right? And I think we're seeing that right now. The data kind of suggests that the northern areas didn't see the mortality that we did. Their buck-to-doe ratios are a little bit higher. 134, 135, like they got hit with like the 2020 winter was pretty bad on them, right? And the herd is down there in trouble.
I've also seen bucks, these mountains right here, and they winter right here.
Right.
They don't-
Some do, yeah,
They don't know it.
right. And our winter's obviously very different than what happens on the other side.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It never leave.
Yeah, I mean, that's, our deer here, they're somewhere up there, right? And, but they'll come from weird places, like, you'd think, oh, well, they're on the face here, then they're in the North Fork Swift Creek in the summer. Well, no, they're not. Maybe some of them are, maybe. But then I think that's, you know, over time, that's how they've evolved and adapted to kind of have diverse migrations, right? And that helps them keep their bloodlines from being inbred and keeps them from surviving and all that stuff, so. But I think when you are in season scouting, I mean, this is important all the time, but field judging is really, really important, right? Because a lot of times you gotta make that decision right then. Whereas preseason, when I preseason scout, I like to take a digiscope with me, right? This is the all-in system. It's magnetic, but, and I like to film them. So any deer that I'm like, oh, that one looks pretty good, I'll film it, right? Because there's been a few times when I sort of wrote off a buck because whatever reason, like the angle wasn't good, or like your first impressions have a big play on what you think an animal is too. That lets me kind of take that footage home and watch it later and be a little more discerning on it and be like, is he really 200 inches, right? Or does he grow from 165 to 185, right? Like I've had that happen too. So I like to do that. When you don't have that chance to kind of take that home and look at footage or think about an animal, like you got to make that decision right then. And I think that's the hardest thing, is to be able to field judge animals in the field, right? And so sort of when I field judge bucks, and same thing with taking pictures of them, it's way better to do it on a live animal, right? Like you can look at a field photo, somebody killed a buck, how big's that buck? Well, angles of lenses and all that stuff makes it really tough. There's a few things, I think our deer here are a little bigger. Like you talk to people in Utah, they'll say, oh, a deer's ears are 18 inches. Well, I think here they're 22 to 24 inches on a mature buck, right? Sometimes bigger than that, 26. I've seen them with 28-inch ears, right? But I went and measured some of my mounts, right, just to make sure my numbers were right. And they're usually 24, right? If a buck's outside his ears or at his ears, I'm calling him 25-inch buck here. Now, they do vary, right? You get, just like people, body sizes on deer vary, and even ear size varies. The other rule I like to keep is the rule, what called the rule of 8, right? So a mule deer's ears are usually about 8 inches. Distance from its eye to the end of its nose from the side is usually about 8 inches. And then the distance between the outside of its eyeballs is also about 8 inches, right? So if you can remember that, how long is that? It's 8 inches, right? So if they turn their head, you can look at their main beam. If their main beam comes out to their nose, they usually have a, 22 to 24-inch main beam. And then you can look at the ear length and figure out the height of their G2s. If you want to shoot a 180-inch deer, then one antler needs to score 80 inches, right? So, and part of that, if you don't know how to score, you can learn how to score. Like, that's why I brought these sheds. Okay, Angel, how big is this buck? What's the score? Because you're the shed hunter, game Jim. Okay, these are the hardest, these are the bucks that get you in trouble, right? Like, you look at him, he's got deep forks, right? He's pretty heavy. Yeah, I think he's 165, right? Somewhere right in there, depending on his spread credit, right? Not that 165-inch deer isn't a great deer for some hunters, right? But when you're kind of looking at that next level, 170, 180 buck, these are the bucks that you're going to be disappointed when you put the tape measure on them, right? Because they're going to be 24, 26 inches. You just need a little more on them to make them an 80-inch horn, right? So, and it takes quite a bit. You get a 180-inch deer, you gotta have some pretty good length everywhere. You know, if your G2s aren't 16 inches, then then they're making up for it somewhere else, right? And you'll see a lot of deer that are exceptional in one area and not in another, right? Or they have one short time, and like, if you're really focused on score, like, that's where you can get disappointed pretty easy. So I don't know that it's great to focus all on score, because you're bound to get disappointed. If you can find a buck that has a great big frame, and he's got either 3x4, you know, 7-year-old buck, still like exactly what you want, but he's missing a little bit of time, right? And same thing on the flip side, extras are your friend when it comes to scoring. Any inline or cheater, you can, you know, a couple of cheaters turns a 170-inch buck into a 185-inch buck. So all that stuff I think is important. But yeah, use their body. You can compare buck body size one to another too. It's pretty rare that you find a big mature deer that's shrimpy bodied. It does happen every once in a while, but not that often. This buck here, he was, well, actually, I have some games for us to guess some deer, okay? So let's start with this one, right? So how wide do you think this buck is?
29 3/4. Outside of the back to the back.
From here to here.
Yep.
27.
27. Any more guesses? Okay.
28 and a half. 27 and a half.
27 and a half.
Or 7.05.
Kyle, what do you think?
I think he's right at 30.
Well, you're all wrong. He was 32.
No way.
Yep. 32-inch buck, okay? We got sheds off of him, and so what do you think his,
6 inches past his ear.
what do you think his gross score is?
195.
Mm,
199.
Say
Maybe close to 190.
187.
186.
Matt got it. So
$180.
you all underestimated his width and overestimated his score, right? Okay, so he was like 180, like pretty much right on the dot this year. Okay, we got sheds off of him. This is a buck that wintered behind my dad's house, I don't know, 20 years ago, right?
That's juniors.
Well, we called him Curly, is what we called him.
That's cool.
Oh, no, I actually have the sheds off that one.
Do you?
Yeah. 2009, we called it chocolate. Because it was so chocolate warm.
Right.
Yeah.
And what did your set score?
Oh, it was tiny. Yeah, really fun.
Yeah.
Weak fronts, but really heavy.
This was his best year,
Yeah.
but he's still a little weak on that front right there.
Was he busted off on the back?
Yeah, like that one.
He had such nerves, like, I'm not kidding, like, that's his time. That way.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about this buck is that he wasn't always a typical either.
Right.
Yeah. So he was which is, I haven't seen this very many times. And I know this buck because he'd come eat corn out of your hand. Back then we fed rolled corn, right?
Mhm.
And we could whistle at him and he'd come down to the house.
You remember how big his body was?
Oh, yeah.
He was tiny.
Well, I don't remember him being, he was a little short, yeah, kind of long.
Yeah.
But he had 2 cheaters on each side. When he was 3 and 4 years old, he had cheaters here, here, and there, and like a 24-inch frame. And then one year he came back and he lost all the cheaters and he was a typical and he stayed that way until he died. And I think he lived to be 8, something like that. Anyway, all right. What about this buck? So this is, some of these are pretty crappy pictures, but sometimes this is all you get, right? This is digiscoping footage through my spotter. So looking through my spotter, I'm seeing the same thing. Okay? This is, when I first saw him right here, okay? Then he went bedded down and I got that. Then as the sun came up, then my pictures got better. Right, and I got these two.
You're probably breathing so hard all the
Yeah.
Got a little excited.
It's fogging up the screen.
That's a nice looking dog.
Well, I underestimated him.
You did?
Yeah.
Looks like he's in the 190s.
Well, then
Super
that's,
tall.
that's what I thought he was too. Now, this is also August 1st, okay? So, like, that plays into it a little bit too, because you'll still see some growth. And sometimes a lot of growth in August, sometimes not so much. Okay, so notice he's got, I called this buck triple cheaters. He had two on that side, one off the other side, right? A big frame. Any thoughts?
So he's got good forks. I can't see his back left fork. So good
Right there.
fork. Yep.
Yes.
So he's still a little balled up.
Big deer.
What do you guys
So
think?
you had matching?
He had two and one. So he had three cheaters total. That looks like a fork cheater, but it's not. That's a cheater in the,
So you're saying that buck's over it for the 190?
yeah.
Oh.
So I guessed him like 195, right? So he was killed by a local, and he went 211.
Looks nice and heavy.
Oh yeah, no, he's a bigger frame than you think, right? I don't know how wide he was, probably pushing 30, really tall, some extras, right? And this is where I think judging comes into play a lot, because you're gonna find, and that's why it's good to look at a buck more than once and in different lighting conditions, because it's easy to mess it up, right? You say, oh, I'm gonna go hunt a different deer that's 190, well, I just passed up on a 210 plus, right? Okay. Here's another one. So when I first glassed this buck, it was early. This is when I first saw him right here. And he was feeding. And then he kind of worked his way up the hill. And I don't see him out in the sun like this a ton, but he got out in the sun and fed for quite a while. Kind of got in the shade of this tree and then moved up into the jack pines right there. What do you think? It's hard to tell, right? And I picked some of these pictures because it can be, like you're in your spotter and it's 1,200 yards away and you're trying to see it, right? And that's about all you can pick up.
He looks like a younger buck, but not that old.
I don't know how old he is. I don't think he's that young, but you can start to see his brisket here.
I guess I was going by the upper left.
Right. Yeah. Anyone want to guess?
What's up?
187.
Based on the upper right, I'd go 180.
So I thought he was like 175 when I first saw him, right? So I killed this buck in 2016. He broke like that much off, and I think he went 189. So I think if he hadn't broken, he'd be 192, okay? But it's pretty easy to misjudge him. He's 29 3/4 wide, right? He's got like a 17-inch G2, so he's not crazy tall, 16 and a half, but he's real solid on all of his forks. He's got big fronts. and like 25-inch main beam, so he's got a good main beam. Yep. All right, I think one more.
You know what?
At Larry.
Just on the different states in the West, you gotta be careful field judging because, like, for example, here in Wyoming, these deer, they're huge.
Right.
Compared to central Idaho bucks. So, like, I mean, I would have called it exactly what everybody was calling them. But yeah, you just gotta be really careful and know the state because, I mean, these deer are usually bigger than you think they are.
Right. Yeah, and I think like you go to another state, and even your ear spread's gonna be 2 to 4 inches smaller.
Yeah, so our average in central is about 22.
Right.
I was a big,
Yeah. It's always funner when they score bigger than you think. And this is kind of an interesting buck. So I have him European mounted, and his brisket's like that big. His neck is not big though. So and the taxidermist was like,
It's gonna look weird.
he commented how the neck was small on it, but you can see how deep he is through here. It's kind of an interesting build on him, but anyway. All right, this buck. So I tried to put bucks in that were killed, and I knew at least some measurement on them, right? So I didn't kill this buck. Somebody else did.
is that a three on the right side?
Yep. Yep. So he's a 3x4, right? 3 on his right, 4 on his left. So I don't know gross score on this buck. I know the width. Okay, so how wide do you think he is?
34?
32.
28.
I'm just looking at that back of it. He always looks bigger when your head's away.
So, and then be careful of his view,
That was
right?
the one that scared me every time.
Don't look at that.
This view gets you every time.
I think it's like 28.
30.
You're going away.
Yeah.
But I wanted to put this one into contrast to that one, right? Because that looks a lot different than that. But these were all taken from the same spot, you know.
31.
So he was 32 3/4.
I guessed it. I gotta start to.
My guess is he's right, like 180. The things that, so he's got a great spread. This is one of those bucks that has a great world-class one thing and not great other things, right? So he's not very tall, and then he's missing a whole tine on his right side. But kind of a cool, I mean, I think he's in the age class that you're targeting, right? You can see his, kind of his pot belly, his brisket's starting to kind of stick out. Those are things I look for.
Have you,
Try and
seen what, like, really big front shoulder humps on them?
On the top of their back?
Yeah, on the front, where you get like, when you raise up like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you'll get, like an old horse, like you can get a sway back buck sometimes.
Mhm.
I think that they're usually 7 or 8 years old when that happens.
It's just hard to field judge them because you get so many people who are going out there and constantly see 200-inch deer, and you know they're not.
Right.
They're calling 180-inch deer 200, so then you're sitting there picking them apart, and you're probably calling it less than it actually is because you're not wanting to be that guy.
Right. And that's why I like to take pictures, right? Because I can come home and say, all right, so you look at this picture, you're like, oh, 200-incher, right? Well, if you can get a few different angles, here, you can see his ears comes clear up to here, right? So his G2 is only like 12 or 13 inches on that side, right? So that gives you an idea of like his frame. Like, okay, if he's only got a 13-inch G2, then he's got to make it up somewhere else, and he doesn't really, right? His forks are not huge. I mean, he's a great buck, sure. Like, you don't run into true 32-inch mainframe bucks very often.
Was that a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old?
He looks 5, 5 or 6 to me, but it's hard to say. So the last thing, anyone have any more questions about in-season scouting or wanted, not even questions, just anything you want to talk about, field judging? Hopefully that was valuable for everybody.
I just think of this younger kids, it took me a lot of miles to figure out, you can see more deer sitting on your hind end than you are pushing the brush.
Yeah, that's a fact.
And don't fast track your way to being too picky either.
And like, you know how you were saying you like to see new areas, at least 3 new areas a year? I did that too for a long time, and then I stopped, and I started just focusing 3 years on one area.
Right.
And actually, I saw a lot more bucks and animals, but I never even knew they were there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, along with that, I mean, I hunted one area since I was, well, since my dad passed away in 2008. And only recently, in the last probably span of 4 or 5 years, did I really learn how to hunt that specific area, right? I've gone in there since 2008, and yeah, we saw good deer in there and chased some good deer, but until you sit down and you actually learn where the deer are coming from, where their hideouts are, you know, where they're picking up water, where their favorite feed is, like, you sit down for,
Right.
you know, good handful of glassing sessions, you're gonna start to see some bigger deer, you know,
Right.
because most of the time, they don't come out until it's almost too dark to see.
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna see all those little ones, and you're like, man, there's nothing really here, but if you're
Right.
patient and you sit down long enough, you're gonna see way more.
Yeah, and I think over time, you get an idea of, even within a range, sort of like the potential of certain areas. Like, I do think certain areas hold more mature deer than others. Setting trail cameras gave me a really big understanding of how many more, like, bigger deer there are than I thought, too. Because I'd go glass, I don't know, there was a buck that I didn't shoot in 2016, and I wanted to kill him in 2017. And so I went into there and I think I went in 5 times, mornings and evenings, and just to try and turn him up, and I had 3 cameras in the basin too, and I never turned him up. So the prior year I'd seen him at the end of August. It was when I killed that buck that I just showed you, that middle one. I was hunting that buck, and then I found this other buck. So like, amount of time in the area, and I had trail cameras running all the time, and that deer never walked by a camera, and I never glassed him up, right? Well, I went back on the opening day of the rifle. It was one of those foggy, nasty years. The fog's bouncing up and down like this, and I'm just kind of glassing around, freezing to death, you know, and the fog bounced up like an extra 200 feet. I remember just hitting it with my optics and just moving across, and that buck standing there in the chute like 400 yards, right? So, and that's the mystery of big mule deer, and that's why you got to stay persistent. Like, so I shot him, yeah. I don't know where he went, right? I don't know why, if he moved in late, or if he was there the whole time and I just never picked him up, or if he was transitioning. He'd been there the year before, and then he came back. Then after I killed him, I checked my trail camera, and there he is on my trail camera the night before, right? So I don't know if he just, and that's the hard thing to know, because we don't have every piece of the puzzle. So it's like, well, maybe he was there the whole time. Maybe he wasn't, right? Maybe he was 2 basins over and moved over. Who knows? I don't know what drives him to do that, but they can be a little bit random. And that's why I think this next part's so important. I don't want to go on forever and ever, but identifying patterns. So once you found your deer that you want to hunt, then this is the next step, right? So people call it patterning mule deer. I think you're just looking for clues, right? Whether that's things he's doing more than once, right? Feeding areas he's in more than once, water that he's hitting. And I like to say this, if you find him twice, like, your odds of killing that deer just went way up, right? Like, if you can find him a second time, and that's, even if it's just summer in the velvet, right? Like, there's a lot of deer I see once, I never see them again. If I see them twice, there's pretty good odds I'm gonna see them again, right? So, that's probably my favorite thing, is trying to find them again. And then if I found them twice, then I'm gonna sit there and stay on them and try to identify patterns. We talked about the hardhorn transition here, that falls right on our archery dates, but last year it was 20th of September, right? They held velvet for a long time. And I don't know what it is exactly, like deer go through so many changes. So they, you know, if you think about that time of year, they've got velvet and their velvet's hardening up, so their antlers probably aren't as sensitive. They're also starting to turn gray, right? So especially those older bucks, you'll see around the 20th of August, their coats are changing colors.
I think some of them get knocked off, I think they really do.
Right. Well, and the reason why, right? That's the thing I don't really know. I know there's a lot going on, right? The weather's changing, it's starting to freeze. You're getting hard freezes on their food source, which I think changes their behavior. Like, there's a lot of factors that kind of happen all at once, and I don't know if it's one factor that makes them act the way they do, or it's sort of the combination, or they're smarter than we think, and they just realize, like, hey, it's almost hunting season. I do think sometimes, at least I don't give them enough credit for being as smart as they are. I think they have the ability to make some fairly complex decisions and remember things, right? But yeah, that's a big one. Hardhorn transition, especially if you can find them again after he's hardhorn, that's a big deal. But even if finding them twice with their velvet on is big. And then sometimes I'll take a notebook and just write down, like, okay, this day, this time, I saw him doing this, right? Or I'll film it and I can look at the timestamps of, like, all right, I saw him this day, he was feeding here, right? Like, and I've seen bucks, hunted bucks, killed bucks, watched other people kill bucks in areas where I didn't know a deer went, right? Like, I killed a buck one time, and we were still in the area, and we had a guide and a hunter come up, and they were like, oh, we're hunting this deer. I'm like, well, I think we killed him yesterday, right? And show them a picture. Oh, cool. Yeah, I always see him over here. And I'm like, I've never seen him over there, right? So, like, every time he saw him, he was over there. Well, I put in a lot of days on that deer, and I never saw him over there. So, it's all kind of an idea of identifying patterns. I know some hunters say that deer have a 3-day schedule. I think that's a generalization. Like, I don't think they're necessarily gonna come to the same water hole every 3 days, right? At least if they do, I've tried to watch them do it and I haven't been able to. But try to identify a pattern for them. So I think for the most part, they're gonna have personalities a lot like people, where they have a certain home range they like to hang out in, and a place they feel comfortable, where they have all the things they need, right? They have food and water and an escape area, right? And a place to bed. So if you can kind of find those, like, hey, I saw him moving from here to here, or when he came into this meadow, he came from this side, right? I saw him drink right here. Like, all those things, try to usually put the puzzle together. Expect them to change, right? I think that's easy to say. And then persistence and time, right? Like, this is the most important thing. And I know this is also the most scarce resource for all of us all the time in everything that we do, right? Like, trying to prioritize time to go and do this is hard because we have limited time from work and family, and, you know, there's everything that weighs on us. Is try to spend as much time as you can, and then try to make the most of your time. Anytime you're not hanging out with a buck, then you don't know what happened, right? So that's another one. Like, it's really hard for me to skip the rifle opener, and it's hard for me to leave after the archery opener, but I have to, right? Because I can't stay out for a month. I wish I could, but guys will say, oh, you're gonna go into that area on the rifle opener. Well, yeah, because if I don't kill him, I gotta know if somebody else did, right? Or if he got bumped, if he's gone. If you leave for a day, 3 days, and come back, I mean, you could have had 100 horses to go through there and pack that buck out. You never know, right? And so I like to keep that in mind all the time too. So I try to prioritize my time to give myself the best outcome, or the best chance of killing that buck. And so if that means I need to prioritize my time on the opener, where I'm 3 days sitting on my butt watching orange hats run around, right? And then they clear out and the buck comes back out. Or if I can get on him first, or if I have to leave. Sometimes I like to have another buck in my back pocket. And it doesn't always work out. I've hunted a deer for 20 days, or parts of 20 days, and never turned them up. So that's what makes it so fun. But that's about all I got. Anybody have any more questions or anything they want to add? Be persistent, yep. So, Matt, let's turn it over to you. Matt's gonna kind of pick up where I left off,
Okay.
I guess.
Should we just take a break for just a
Yeah,
second?
you guys wanna take a break?
Set up on that.
Yeah.
That work?
Yep.
Sweet.
Seriously. Listen out.
That's what you can't get online.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. Not that much.
I know.
I got one side of this.
I think he's got one full set and then one side of that buck, probably. Dude, that buck got killed up.
Right across.
Do you know where he was?
Yeah. And that makes me sad because that buck was awesome. That was killed out of stater.
Right. That Zach Mathis guy did it.
Yeah.
Well, and then there was one right before him too.
Big blades, high guard. Yeah, I have that. I have a light on that one.
You can switch the action. But it's not a lift, it's straight. Yes, when you go forward,
One side, 10 pounds.
no lift. So once you get this.
They were over about males and I killed a deer that he had little stuff all over him.
already got his first year's 2 points. He was first. 3 points. Well, in this one, got his points, that one. So it's like, curly, straight up tripod. I'd be like the horn, tripod.
All right, I think, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm super nervous, so I just can't wait. All right, well, pretty nervous. I don't know why. I can stalk a big buck with my bow, and I'm stone cold calm, but like talking in front of people is really nerve wracking. So, anyways, we'll get through it. But like Brad talked about, we're just gonna dive into kind of the next step, which is the kill zone. So, I guess, I brought my pack today. We can kind of go through this if we want to. We may run out of time. I got a lot of information or whatever, so we'll probably run through the presentation, and then if we have extra time, if you have questions about anything here. My 6-day setup is 39 pounds, so it's super, super lightweight. There's a lot of things here that, like this is my scope, you know. So when I saw Brad pulling his big scope out, like, that would be nice, because this thing sometimes is hard on your eyes, looking through something like that. But,
What is that?
this is the Razor, the Razor 33, and they've got a better one now. But yeah, super lightweight, and a lot of my stuff is just tailored towards the way that I hunt, and that's kind of the way that maybe we should start off. I'll just start with an introduction here. So I'm 36, from Central Idaho. We moved here 3 years ago. I'm married. We've got 2 boys there in the back, Jason and Kate, and I've been hunting for 22 years, and been blessed to take quite a few really good bucks. And so, I'm not coming in here to say this is the way you should do it, but it's working for me, and maybe some things that I'm doing you could apply to your own hunting strategies. Like I said, I'm strictly a backpack guy, so James, we were talking earlier, he's packing his Yeti with his ribeyes, and I'm just like, dude.
I was rubbing it in, I said,
Oh, man.
yeah, that Yeti cooler's not enough for my steak and shrimp, I gotta get another one.
Yeah,
next
he's
year."
like, you better get another one this year. I'm like, you kidding me? We'll meet up about day 4 is what we need to do. But, yeah, so I'm just gonna talk about the kill zone. So the kill zone, basically, it begins the moment that you commit to your target buck. And this could be 10 minutes into it, or it could be 2 days before, right? But it's something within season. It usually involves heightened stress, motions, potential for high physical exertion, and extreme mind control and focus. But like we talked about earlier, so you got to kind of go into your hunting season with some predetermined goal, right? And be realistic about it. If you
have to talk yourself into pursuing a buck, it's probably, it's gonna be disappointing to you in the end, so most likely move to the next basin or draw, right? If a buck looks big right away, you get excited, they're usually worth harvesting, so pretty much, that's, before you enter the kill zone, you got to commit to it. You gotta go all into it. And I've had a lot of buddies around, you know, that I go hunting with, and they're, you know, like, oh, he's a good buck, he's, you know, and if you're even asking any of those kind of questions, it's not probably a buck that you're all in on, you know. If you're just gonna go practice a stalk, it's hunting season, and there's probably other bucks that are gonna be something that you would like to pursue. You maybe move to the next basin, right? But the kill zone equation, there's variables that you can control and there's variables that you can't, okay? So being successful in the kill zone requires you to count for both of them, but not in the same way, right? So let's take James, for example. He's horse hunting across the basin. He jumps off his horse after he sees a buck running away, and he commits right there. You know, that's my buck I want to take. That's going to be different from me sitting on a buck for 2 days waiting for it to get in that perfect position for me to come stock on it, right? So every variable has to be accounted for, but it's a different time frame and it's a different strategy. So we're just going to really quickly go over those variables. So ones you can control are managing your time, your physical abilities, knowledge of the process, weapon effectiveness, and your mindset and focus. So managing time. So you got to be decisive, right? Once you commit to you know, pursuing a target buck, the clock starts ticking, right? So you got to make decisions quickly, put a plan together. Oh, I forgot about that. So if you want to fill your name and throw your email, this presentation I can email to you, so you don't have to remember all the variables and all that stuff. And that's just going around. So, but be cognizant of the changes in the plan and adapt quickly. Don't second guess yourself, and don't take shortcuts. Okay. So all the variables have to be addressed. It will not work if you skip one. So managing your time is really important, and you have to complete all of them. And now, there's also a variable of luck, and I don't even talk about this, but things can happen out of luck, and that's one of them that you can't control. So it may work out based on luck, but you got to do basically everything in your power to cover the variables you can control, and then put those you can't on the back burner. So physical abilities, we all are in different stages of our lives. We're all, you know, some of us are young guys, some of us are older guys, right? But basically, and I need to kind of preface this with, like it's based on your hunting style, right? But in my hunting style, I need to be super physically fit, and I need to have the ability to so have a fitness program, do body weight exercises, practice stalking, yoga poses. A lot of people are, you know, kind of question that, but when you're set up and you're, you know, like this for 2 hours waiting on that buck to stand, you know, those yoga poses actually do really help. And I know that sounds silly, but so never show up to the hunt with new boots. So the next one is just knowledge of the process. So be humble and willing to learn, gain as much information as possible about stalking methods and shooting tactics and mule deer behavior. So the way that you can better manage this, there's podcasts out there, reach out to other hunters around, and books and magazines. I've actually, that book by, well,
David Long?
yes. That's what started this for me. Not that specific book, but, Robbie Denning and those guys, they really helped me, learn this whole process really quickly. But, so we also, another variable that we can control is our weapon. So practice with your weapon and be confident with it. Pushing past your weapon's abilities will most certainly produce failed, kill zone opportunities. And I don't know if you guys have heard of, the Joel Turner mindset IQ. So he talks about just the way that a shot process is, the way that you can control target panic with a bow. And when you're shooting, there's just a whole bunch of mental things that you have to process, and I would just encourage you to look at that. I'm diving through this really fast, so.
Do you still have that necklace?
You like that?
Well, it's just funny because
yeah, that
everybody
was-
focuses so much on gear and camo.
Yeah.
You got it done.
I know, so that was in high school.
I hate,
Yeah.
I'm just saying it happens.
Yeah.
You can't kill them sitting at home, and a lot of people are still worried about having the most high-dollar gear.
You know what? That's 100% right.
You gotta be out hunting to kill them.
That's it. Yeah, I think, so this is my first buck
That's cool.
ever. I was 16, my dad took me. I did not want to be there. I had a girlfriend, and I had a football game on Friday, and I did not want to be there. And anyways, he took me up on the mountain, and I had no clue what I was doing. I had no clue what, even if that was a good buck, right? And he took me up there, we sat on the ridge, opening morning, and he walked across, he had previously scouted it, and I shot him, then I walked up on it, and it flipped something in me. I didn't care about my girlfriend anymore. I didn't care about, I still cared about football, but I was,
Your buck was your nose bone.
so, that's a great point, right? So there's those moments in your life where something flips, right? And that was the moment for me right there. I've killed 20 plus bucks since then, mostly, 180 plus deer, but that one right there is when it all started. So, yeah, thanks for pointing that out, I appreciate it. And honestly, I'm fumbling through this, I got a whole bunch of information, but we can slow it down if you guys have anything along the way. I probably made too big of a presentation, honestly, but, this is another buck, this is 211 buck. That was a great moment for my dad and I, but, so, mindset and focus, all right, we'll just really quickly, you can kind of go through these, but, so make harvesting that buck the most important event of the day, all right? When we're up on the mountain, a lot of us get distracted by work, cell phones, just anything in our lives, right? The kids at home, and I'm not saying that's a distraction, I'm just saying you have to clear your mind 100% from all of that, okay, especially in bow hunting. So just keep that in mind, that's one of those variables you can control. Now these are ones you can't, environmental factors, deer behavior, and other hunters, okay? So environmental factors, so stay in tune with the weather, and realize it's out of your control, right? We got winds and thermals, and choosing a route through country is really important too. A lot of people don't think about that, but as you're traveling through country, or putting on a stock, these mountains are brutal, these ones here, and there's a lot of places we cannot go, or it's difficult for us to travel, and we need to keep that in mind along this process. All right, and we're talking about specifically the kill zone time. All right, so it's when you commit to that buck and you're going to kill it. Okay, this is another 194 buck with my bow, and so mule deer behavior, like Brad was talking about, bucks that are 4+ years old they're ghosts, okay? That's probably why, James, that he was probably sitting there, you probably walked by him multiple times, right?
Yes.
And these deer, we don't give them enough credit for what they do. What amazes me is that I can hike 10 miles across the top of the wall and see, I mean, I saw one buck that's probably 195, but every other buck, I didn't see any, right? And then I walk out on the winter range, not this year, this was not a good year, but you walk out there and you see what is actually hidden, right? What's in the timber. And I think a lot of those bucks, we're talking about high country deer, but they're like on the trail up as you're going up, right? They're probably 1 mile, 2 miles off that trail, the main trail, in the timber up some little draw that nobody goes up, right? So you gotta remember that, all right? And you're not always gonna win the battle. It's just not gonna always happen. So other hunters and predators, like I come from central Idaho where I was the only one for 10 miles, okay? If I'm out hunting deer, there is not anyone in sight. When I came to Wyoming, it was an eye-opener for me. I didn't realize that this is a factor of killing deer, is seeing that an orange hat on every ridge. And honestly, I made a mistake last year. I'll be flat out honest. I had a buck. He was a big buck during archery season. I got a shot off on him and stuck the arrow in his bed. He jumped up, and anyways, I pursued him after a while, and then the rifle opener happened. The lights come on. There's 3 bucks in the basin, big frame buck in the middle. I'm like, okay. Well, after I'm seeing headlamps on every ridge right below me, I start to panic, right? Crap, there's a buck, I gotta get going, and I shot him, was not the buck. He was he's just a good 4-point, maybe a 160 buck, which is still a good buck, but was a little disappointing. So like, you think about, other hunters are a big factor in this, and not only for the pressure, but also I go solo. And the reason why I go solo is because even your buddies, okay, it's hard to be able to have instinctive thoughts when you have other people around, okay? And not that I don't like going with other people, but you have to have that killer's instinct, and sometimes it comes from within somewhere, and you gotta just follow it, right? Okay, so just something to think about. Those are the variables you can't control, okay? Now, we're just gonna play out a real quick scenario. And like I said, everybody's gonna hunt differently, but this is a high country early season scenario. So say we blast up a target buck. He's bedded in his first bed, okay? You're hunting with a buddy. You got one other hunter sees the same buck, so somebody up the ridge on the knob. It's 9 a.m., so across the canyon a mile, 1,000 feet up. Bedding facing uphill, which is, okay, we'll just say the scenario. So he's under a pine tree. It's southeast of the buck, okay, so think about this, okay, southeast. All right, he's in the shade now. All right, 3 small bucks above the target buck, they're facing down. Thermal sweeping through the basin up to the west. It's a good bed. It's the 4th day of the season, and limited water camp is set up, okay? So that's your scenario. So I don't know, whoever's archery hunters could probably relate to this. Okay, so now the kill sequence starts, right? So first step for me would be mark on X where the buck's at, location and the stalking path, okay? So you gotta travel country all the way across, say he's in this basin here, right, under that tree, okay? This is what I'm talking about, environmental factors, right? Traveling through country, you cannot get to him through here. I tried. There's no way. The only way is right there. And it's like an 80-foot, 80-degree climb, okay? But if I didn't know that, right? So these are the variables you can't control, right? And we're jumping ahead. So, mark on your OnX. Where would you guys go? Like at this point, you got a target buck. What's the game plan? And we can have an open discussion about this if you guys have any thoughts or whatever. But the variable we need to address is managing time and knowledge of the process, okay? So take a few pictures of the terrain. I like to do that because when you get over there, it's gonna look a lot different than where you've seen him at, okay? And this is covering mindset and focus, and then knowledge of the process, okay? So this is the hardest part for me, because I'm such a nice person. But try and talk to the other hunters, including your buddy, and be like, hey, my hardest thing is I always default to them, okay? And this is a real problem. So I'm always like, hey, go try it out, right? Go try it out. But in my mind, I'm like, dude, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to get it done, all right? And so I'm working on this one. But, yeah, so you can't control what other hunters are gonna do. You can't even control what this other guy's gonna do up above you, but you can at least talk to him or talk to your buddy and try and work those details out, okay?
Hey, Matt,
Yeah,
one thing I've worked with this over the years with other guys, and I've worked with some of the best hunters you could ever imagine. And what I found is that two really good hunters will have two totally different ways to go about it, and they're both gonna work.
yep,
But when they're hunting together, when you're hunting together with somebody else that's very successful, one of you has to hunt instinctively, another one has to say, okay, that's what we're gonna do. Because otherwise, you're gonna argue every step of the way. You're gonna see a few different reasons that it's not gonna work, and it's gonna just throw you both off. So one of you just has to say, okay, this hunt's in your hands, I'm gonna do whatever you say. And then that person can be empowered to go and hunt instinctively, because I know what you're talking about. You get that feeling in your gut, man, we're just right, we're going too far, we should sit back here and bugle, or, I'm thinking elk, but you can translate it to deer language however you like. But it's important to just kind of let one person just take the lead,
yeah.
and the other person's gonna have to follow it. In the next situation, it might not work, but the next situation, maybe it's the other guy's turn.
You know what, that's great. The only thing I would say is you need to make sure that guy's just as consistent as you, right? Or
Well, you're not gonna hunt very long together if you're not.
that's the thing, it's like you're gonna have to find buddies that are like you, right?
Yeah,
So,
no doubt.
I mean, so, yeah, I agree. And that's usually where I fall into, because I'm so nice. I'm like, okay, let's try this, right? But then I'm thinking, man, it's second bedtime, like I'm getting nervous, right? And he's moving and we're still working our way up the the bottom, which I know, don't do that, right? Those thermals are gonna shoot right up that basin. And now, so, I don't know what to do with that, right? So that's one of those variables, exactly what I'm talking about, okay? It's one that I can't control, but it's something that we all have to work through, right? Now, not everybody is as intense as I am, and some people are out there, like I should have started off with this, some people out there for just the social aspect of it, right? And that's okay, it's totally cool, okay? Some people are out there just for the experience or just to be out enjoying the mountains, right? But that's not me, I guess. And my wife can attest to that. She is.
We don't
when
hike
it's-
together too much.
Yeah, we hiked together once. And she was like, no way, I am never hiking with you again. Because I don't know, I just get in my zone and that's it. But we're still married after 14 years, so that's good. So basically, so the next step, just commit and take all your gear. This is one thing that I do. Not everybody needs to do this, but in my experience, I hunt with this pack because I can put that together in 10 seconds and be moving through country without having to think back, having to travel back to where I came from, okay? And honestly, a lot of people don't think about that, but there's a mental block there, okay? It's like thinking about how far you've gone on spring break to say you're going to St. George, you're always gonna be thinking about home, okay? This is exactly the same thought process, okay? So when I have my home with me, I don't need to think about traveling back before dark. I don't have all those thoughts that are gonna come in as this process goes, okay? So just something to think about. Okay, and this is the reason why you try and be as physically fit as possible, okay? Most people see a buck right here. They're not even pursuing it. Not today, not tomorrow, not until the weekend, okay? All right, and I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying if it's 9 a.m., I will be on this pass at noon, okay? Most people won't do that, all right? And I'm not, this is coming across wrong, I think, but I'm just saying in order to get the buck killed, you need to be able to commit and travel quickly, all right? So yeah. So you come around the top of the basin, wait until the thermals are consistent. For you younger guys, okay, so if there's a buck over on that side of the room, you can't fool his nose, okay? So he's gonna smell you and he'll be gone, okay? There's no way around that. He may see you and you may pause and he'll forget about you after 10 minutes if you hold still, but if he smells you, he's 100% gone, okay? So you can't ever fool their nose. So thermals, basically, in mountains, okay, so at night, when the air cools, it sucks the air down the canyon, okay? Because the bottom of the canyon is cool, and it's sucking all the air down that canyon, okay? So that's a thermal, right? In the morning, when the sun comes up, it heats just like it is right here. It's heating that air, okay? And it's pulling the air up out of the canyon, okay? So you gotta think about that throughout all of these little draws, okay? So I know in Swift Creek, everybody knows this is Swift Creek. Right here, because I stalked a buck there twice, the thermals are sucking this way, and then they come up this draw and they shoot that way, and I don't know why. I have no clue why it does that. But at 10:30, right here, it goes from this to across there. And the reason why I know is because that buck was bedded right there, and I was in that timber, and I screwed it up. So there's your environmental factors variable, okay? Does anybody have any questions up to this point? Is it too in depth? I feel like I'm going way too deep.
You're doing.
Is it all right?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're doing good.
And I'm all over the place, right? I'm all over the place, but I need to take a deep breath, I guess, is what I need to do. So we made it to the top of the basin. This is when I clear my mind, or we need to kind of slow down a little bit. Maybe drink your water, get some snacks in you, all right? Because you're probably gonna be on that buck the rest of the day. And this is archery situation, okay? But mindset and focus, knowledge of the process, and physical ability, okay? So now you're coming over the top, using the jack pines as cover. You need to relocate the buck. Don't ever skyline yourself, okay? Buck is moved to second bed, but at the same elevation. So now he's looking down, okay? So now you're in a situation here to come down on top of him, so you still have a cliff band, but you're going to be within range if you feel like shooting, you know, a 60-yard shot, 50, 60-yard shot. Now let's cut the distance, keep the buck in view, and watch his body movements. And I'll just kind of see the variables that this covers along the way. So get within 100 yards and reevaluate the situation. Check the wind. So if it's 9 a.m., it's noon up there, all right? By the time you get on him, it's probably 1:30. The wind and the thermals are going to be changing throughout the day, especially in that canyon. I don't know why. And it's probably the truth for every canyon in Region G. I don't know why the wind does the way it does at 1:30, but at that point, you need to either back out until they get consistent again about 4, or try and play that wind, but it most likely is not going to work out if they're all over the place. So this is when, like, the kill zone really gets intense. Okay, so now if you're within 100 yards, you really need to be 100% focused and clear your thoughts. Okay. Now, so now you stock the 50, 60. Absolutely no sounds. One cool tool, and I don't know a lot of archery hunters in here, but when a jet flies over, move. Okay, I know that sounds crazy, but that's how I've killed multiple bucks. Okay, so when you're on a skyline or a ridge top and a jet flies over, that sound of just that jet really does help just blur your movement. I've also stalked in lightning too, and that's not fun, but use the thunder as your moving time, okay? So be aware of the smaller bucks located, or the location, but move to a shooting position on the target buck. So if the buck makes any fast movements or ear repositions, wait until they return to relaxed behavior, and this can take 5 to 10 minutes, okay? All right, so this is where the yoga poses come in. My wife does bar blend, which is like beach body stuff. And I'm telling you, like, I started doing calisthenics because of this exact situation, okay? So you're gonna be probably in weird positions. You're gonna have to use your leg muscles or core to be able to get, stay hidden, okay? So you could be sitting there for 10 minutes, or you could be sitting there for 2 hours, but wait until the buck stands and presents an ethical shot, okay? A lot of guys will freak out right now. At this moment, they will freak out, okay? As soon as that buck moves or gives them vital shot at all, they will shoot, all right? I'll tell you, if you got within 50 yards of a buck and he doesn't know you're there, it's not gonna matter if he stands and looks straight at you. He doesn't know you're there, okay? So let him get up, let him get comfortable, and take an ethical shot, okay? Now, I'm a bow hunter, and the bow hunters that are in here know that sometimes it's just not gonna work out. You're gonna put an arrow over their back or in a bad position, and that's just part of the game, right? But try your best to make an ethical shot. Now, I have struggled with target panic, okay? I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but I never had it. I've killed multiple deer. I never had it, and 2 years ago, it attacked me so bad that I couldn't even shoot my bow. And it was horrible, okay? So what target panic is as soon as you get that pin where you want it, you slam that trigger, because it's just a mindset thing. Now, since then, I've worked through that, and so I'm just saying, in the process, the execution of that shot, that last 10 seconds is the most important. Okay, so whatever you gotta do to get comfortable, and this is with a rifle or a bow, make sure that that last 10 seconds is rock solid, that there is no variable for error in those, okay? And that takes a lot of practice. So then just execute a clean and controlled shot. Hopefully it goes right through his vitals. Once the shot goes off, this is another time people will freak out, okay? When that shot goes off, some people just black out, right? That's the time that you need to be the most focused, okay? And that's with a rifle or a bow. All right, you need to take in every single detail of what happens. So where the buck goes, where he was standing, just as much information as you can take in, okay? So if the buck falls within sight, you close out the kill zone, you're done, okay? If he doesn't, if he runs down the hill, so turn on a tracker if you have one, or use sticks or other natural markers to kind of follow a blood trail if you can. Another thing is, find your arrow, look for whatever types of blood is on it. Are you guys familiar with that kind of, like, if it's dark blood, it's liver, if it's bubbly, it's lung, right? Those kind of things. That's really important to know if you're an archery guy. All right. If there's no blood on it, that's bad. So follow the blood until you can find the buck. If you find him, close it out. If blood runs out, which a high vital shot, 90% of the time, you're not going to find blood for the first 80 yards or more. All right, you're going to get disappointed, okay? And then you may find a little bit of blood, right? If it's a back shot, it may just be drips, just tiny drips of blood. And a lot of guys honestly have lethal shots. I can't believe how many deer I've heard of that get killed in archery season that people will find later, right? A lot of the shots are lethal shots, but the problem is this variable, right? If you don't stick with it and you don't stay focused, you're gonna ruin that opportunity, right? Okay, so just do your best to keep, even line the sticks up or something to figure out where he's headed. All right, and usually a sick buck is gonna head down towards water or down the drop. Okay, so the last slide must be like you leave them overnight, okay? Sometimes that does happen. And then you go back, find blood, continue the search. So a lot of guys, and I've fallen guilty of this, is doing the grid thing. Most times that never works, okay? Because you're covering country and exhausting yourself on a path that he's probably most likely not even close to, okay? Okay, and hopefully we locate the buck expired, close out the kill zone, and then you can let the floodgates open of emotion, okay? Now that's very detailed, right? And I actually debated on this for 2 days to like dive into it that much. But maybe there's a few things in there that you guys could apply, even to rifle, to horse hunting, any of those things that were within this scenario, okay? This is just a scenario that I would go through pretty much every year, hopefully. We're just gonna watch just a little brief.
This is the quickest way to clear out stuck poop.
Right? Well, all right then. Okay. Okay, so this is a scenario in Utah, okay, so we've done all the variables, I'm at the point of when most people will freak out, okay? And we can just watch this really quick. I was clear down here when I spotted him, hiked all the way around, got up on top of him, the wind was consistent, all the variables have been checked, the only thing that I couldn't is the variables I can't control, right? The buck behavior, all of those things. I had to sit there for almost 2 hours until he stood up. And I don't know why he got up. It was 95 degrees, and he just, for some reason, moved off. I think he was headed towards that shade spot, but it worked out. And he ate dirt right there, okay? Now, this is, you don't have to listen to this. This is when the floodgates of emotion comes out, okay? All right. How the heck do we get out of this? There we go. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So that was a bow kill. This is a rifle kill. And I kind of sound like an idiot, but it's okay. Okay, so this is Black Mountain. What is Black Mountain? There we go. Okay. Idiot. Black Mountain, 190 bucks. Okay. Last day of the season, I had hunted for 14 days straight, 100 plus miles. Never saw 4-point the whole time. Okay. Now this is the difference between Idaho and, for some reason, right here. You see a 4-point every day. But this is, I came across down this ridge. Okay. Guess we can't really hear it, but this buck was right here with 4 does. And from, like, I guess the reason why I put this in here is the kill zone in this instance was about 3.5 minutes, right? But all the variables that I talked about had to be, like, they had to be, I guess, applied, right? And there he is, okay? I shot him behind the head. I shot him right here in the neck because that's the only spot I had, right? But I was confident with that rifle, offhand at 240 feet or whatever yards, that I could make that shot and at least drop him because he was headed into the timber, and it was literally probably 30 minutes before dark. Okay, so I just wanted, kind of wanted to show you this because, it's hard to talk about it, but there are real ethical or real applications, real world applications here. And I mean, you don't have to jump on, but if you ever want to jump on YouTube, I've got all my hunts on there.
I just smoked a giant.
And this is cool. This is my dad. I called him right away.
I cannot.
Anyways. All right. So to close it out, basically, I hope that you remember that determination is doing the things you can control. So like all the variables you can control, your physical fitness, your all those things that we talked about, but patience is waiting on the things you can't. So like, anyways, yeah. So check off as many in the kill zone as you can, and then just wait for the things that you can't control. And then don't let self-doubt ruin the learning process. Like for, I guess the younger guys kind of took off, but for my boys, just go for it, okay? Go for it, because you won't learn unless you go for it. I can't even, I mean, I'm really glad that my dad took me that day, right? Because that snapped into me. And then since then, I've just kind of been able to learn a lot of things along the way. But you can't learn unless you try. And there's a lot of people, a lot of guys that I've talked to, they won't even try unless it's a 220, right? What happens when you get a chance at a 220, right? If you don't have this process nailed down, there's a good chance you won't even be able to take that, okay? So maybe just hunt as much as you can, all right? So do you guys have any questions? I know there's a lot, I'm all over the place, but I hope there's a few good takeaways from this today. And is there anything you guys have? Questions or thoughts? Okay. Well, Brad? Yeah, you guys are welcome to come check this out or whatever if you want, or I think that's kind of it.
Going back to talking about hunting with somebody, I've noticed that after you've made your kill shot, I mean, emotions are so high, that's when I like having somebody else there. It's when you're doing that blood trail, if you've got somebody else that's a little more level-minded, it seems like if I've made a shot or whatever's going on and I'm tracking a buck, you're just looking for blood and you're not watching tracks and you're just so super focused. And then doubt comes in, wounded and you got away and you're thinking worst case scenario instead of just level-headed, to where that's when having your partner be able to come in, because his emotions aren't quite at that level where they can kind of turn it down a little or just keep watching, follow tracks, stuff like that.
That's
Yeah, you make a bad shot or something where you're not getting as much blood as you want or in the guts or something, and then you're pretty much just tracking. But that way one guy can go to the next blood spot and have somebody follow that, and you can kind of line out and decide where they're going and where the next one should be, pointing in the right direction. I don't know. For me, that's what I really enjoy, having somebody there that, I don't know, it's special having the moment with somebody else. Solo hunting's got its cons, pros.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think, so, I didn't even think about that, but like having somebody that's a motivator with you is a real big thing too. You know, it's not just about killing the deer, it's about keeping going, right? And after about 5 days, I'm starting to talk to rocks. I'm like, I'm just like, yeah. So I mean, there's pros and cons, obviously, but I guess I would just say, if you have a buddy that is a good enough buddy that you can just flat out be honest with them and just say, listen, I feel that we should do this, right? And like take turns, like James is saying, you know, take turns, but like, yeah, I think.
Deer are way different than elk though. It's way easier to travel together when you're hunting elk. Deer, it's almost like you can be together, but once it's time to stalk on one, it's one guy's, the other guy hangs back.
Yep.
And he can be the eyes or whatever he needs to be. I don't care if he goes and hunts something else, but like, you've got to have that killer instinct. As soon as you start second guessing or you asking your buddy what he thinks you ought to do, it just doesn't seem to work out safe.
Yeah, and also, you know, having a spotter is great. Like, if you got a guy sitting on that same glassing knob and you got that buck, I mean, somehow can communicate with signals or whatever, at least to like help you with that too. So yeah, any other questions or thoughts or anything like that? And there's my, I hate to admit this, but you see that crossbow right there? That's the result of target panic. And I'll tell you what, it's not worth it. That thing's sold, right? And I'll just tell you, like in anything in life, if you got something you got to work through, do it right away. And this was mine. I mean, this is a very small thing. It's my hobby, right? But work through it so you can become a better whatever you want to be. And I think, yeah.
I had target panic 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Everybody goes through it. Everybody goes through it.
I think it has to do with, like we talk about Joel Turner, his stuff's really good. Essentially, not that you need to go subscribe to him or anything, but like we talk about buck fever, we all get buck fever. But what happens is you lose control, like the adrenaline's so big or whatever that you aren't present anymore and you're not making decisions anymore. And as you grow through that, then I think, like when you're a kid, you make a lot of buck fever mistakes because you don't know how to handle it, right? And as you go through it more and more and more, you get to where you can handle it more. But sometimes it sneaks up on you.
Oh, yeah.
And I think target panic is just another form of that.
Yeah.
Because you get so hyper-focused on your shot that you, for just a second, you kind of black out.
Yeah. So I hate to admit this, but I missed three 180 bucks, 180 plus bucks because of target panic. Right? And I wish I would have figured that out before. There was one in central Idaho, this buck this year, and the one the year before. So, no more. No more. It's done. But
For me, I find with archery, well, rifle, you have target panic with a rifle too.
yeah, you know, you can jerk that trigger just as easy as you can the release.
But
Yeah.
for me, I think the key to it, to both not get it and to overcome it, is to switch it up, switch up your shooting sequence, I guess.
Yeah.
right? So that it forces you to be more present. So like, you know, for me to go over target panic, I had to change release styles. So I was using a finger release. I had to go to a thumb, because it changes the whole mechanic of everything. Your anchor's different. Even the muscles in your hand, it just feels totally different.
Yeah.
And so I went, and I bet I shot 500 shots through a thumb release before I could go back to a finger. And same thing with a rifle, you know,
Yeah.
so like, not that motor memory and muscle memory and all that isn't important, but like switch it up every once in a while, because you'll find that you're more present in your shot process. And it makes you a better, more rounded hunter too, because now you can function
Yeah.
in different circumstances.
So there's a time between the setup and the shot that's milliseconds. It can be, and that's the time that your brain really says it's okay to let it go. Okay, so it's okay for that explosion to happen, either on a bow or a rifle, and it's so you got to be. And what it is like, so with a bow, because your pin is floating, it's floating, right? And as soon as it hits that spot it's supposed to be on, your brain is telling you now. Yeah. But the way that the process is supposed to go, is you're supposed to be able to at any time let down. Okay? At any time stop the process, and that's true mind control. Okay? If you can do that, and run your pin across the center without shooting, then you've cured target panic. Okay, so a lot of guys will never even get there because, like on their rifle, as soon as it swings through there, it's on the vitals, it's gone, right? So just a thought, something to think about.
Well, let's hear from some of our older gentlemen that have been around and worked through this. Talk to us about this.
I'm enjoying what I'm listening to. And I know I've been suffering from target panic.
How have you worked through it?
I just worked at it. I just kept on doing it. I'm not the best archery shot, especially now. I have my shoulder replaced.
You know,
I just worked through it. I didn't know there was somebody I could look up and have a cure for it, you know. So I just worked through it.
so if you look up Joel Turner, he literally can get you over that in a day.
Is that right?
Yeah, so if anybody in here is thinking about that or has had that, it really does work. The other thing is, as we get older, I mean, I'm 36, but I can tell that even in my shoulders and just the way that I hold a bow, that plays a factor in too, because I can't hold as rock solid as I used to be able to. And I don't know, and so that's actually exponentially affecting that target panic. Because now I'm more wobbly than I used to be, and it's just a mind game you gotta play. You know? But I mitigate it with an anchor point under my chin, rather than holding it like this. So I anchor it under my chin with, I've got weird jawbone, but I got this little bump, and I can hold it right there, and it's rock solid, okay? So there's little tips and tactics that you can do to try and help mitigate that. So, but yeah, I appreciate you guys. Like, I'm super nervous, as you probably you can tell, but I hope there was something through this that you guys really get, and I really appreciate being able to do this, Brad. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions or whatever, we can keep going or do whatever.
Anybody got anything?
Okay.
We're good, thanks, man.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds
that's
good. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Okay.
Well, guys, we still got some stuff back there, books, shirts. Looks like someone took the lighters without taking the pyro putty. Does anybody in here have a lighter? Make sure and pick up the pyro putty too. Those lighters are.
Good job.
Those lighters are
Thank you.
arc lighters, so they're electric. You can charge them, but they're designed to work with pyro putty. Stick it in your
At 39.
fire, and it lights, it's gonna kill them.
Yep.
Thanks for coming, guys. Thanks for sitting.
Yeah, so this is my whole camp. Right there, that's my whole camp.
Well, when you get up there, you grew up there?
Yeah. Yep.
Usually, and then they,
Yeah, so you can, yeah. So I'll run, like I'll sleep up, and depending on where it's at, if it's up, I'll just bail and drop that, and then just go after it, right? You know. Buy one, Brad. I don't know. Thank you.
you're nervous, obviously got it down.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. What's your name? Wayne. Wayne. Right.
Oh, it's an excellent pass.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite fit in the pocket, so you have to run up.
So this has.
My goal is to have the whole thing
Set up.
It was going downhill. But the thing, see, I was like, let's strip this down and just do 2 leg sections. But it actually, it's better than I thought it was going to be. Because now you have like this thickness on the bottom leg section, and it's super stable. Like,
Does this kind of fit? Does this kind of fit?
feel,
Does this kind of fit?
I don't.
Oh,
but yeah, and then it'll do what all the other ones do. 3 sections here. This is threaded, so it'll go all the way on the ground. Just barely too big. It'll fit any head. Obviously, our head fits on it.
It's a B327. The reason why I picked the short bow is because
If you sit less, we're doing that's our biggest feedback is like, oh, I want to be able to stand up. I want to be able to
drop it on my hands on the log.
terrain like this.
You're always sitting down because you're not going to stand there for.
If you stand up, you're skylight.
Yeah, that's
And-
what I know now.
And the further off the ground you get, you get so much more movement in your tripod.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I don't know. I like how it turned out.
Yeah, great. You want to go with me? Okay, well, I think Mom stayed.
Bummed out, I never knew about it. I hope you did.
We'll do it another one.
I would have loved to have.
That was our first try.
Oh, dude,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
It was good.
You aren't doing any more this year?
No, we'll probably do some
Oh,
more.
this year?
I don't know. If we can get this many guys out, then we'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
In the summer, it gets a little harder, but we're wondering about combining with
Okay, okay.
No, I get
something for guys to come out there
Yeah,
and do a
good to
little
see you.
stuff.
There you go.
Chase, Jason.
Well, thanks for putting it on.
Felt like
Yeah,
we were
thanks
all
for
over
coming.
the place.
No,
Yeah.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, thank you. What's your name?
Thanks for coming.
What's your last name?
How's it going? You doing good? You enjoying retired life, or are you retired?
I'll send this,
Let me kill this.
Able to get out more? Waiting for it to dry off?
Yeah, seriously.
See
Well,
what's out there?